À-bas-le-ciel.
Lauren Southern did a video in response to the problem of nihilism and offering you various constructive suggestions if you are struggling with nihilism or if you're choosing not to be a nihilist, which include converting to Catholicism. Have you considered that? If you're a nihilist, and you're looking to Lauren Southern for guidance, maybe you should think about Catholicism.
Considering nihilism is literally defined as not feeling any sense of religion or deeper purpose to life. Of course, number 4 is maybe looking into religion. And I think I'll let you take this away.
So as I mentioned before, I am Catholic. So for Catholics, Christians, you think of your ultimate purpose in life is obviously to get to heaven.
And this is tip number 5, is have an overarching story and narrative that you want to pursue.
Let's just make up something you can't actually believe in, but then treat it like a religion anyway. Some kind of big narrative.
Nihilism, the dictionary definition anyways, is the rejection of all religious and moral principles and the belief that life is meaningless.
Lauren Southern's video is actually titled 5 Cures for Nihilism. Cures. And, of course, this is even more amusing to me because one of the cures posed is religion itself. And I think many people might see nihilism itself instead as a cure for religion. But much more broadly, of course, it is a cure for any ideology. The most fundamental thing we have to get across to people as nihilists is that, yes, nihilism is a real philosophy. Nihilism is not just an act of teenage rebellion against your high school principal. Nihilism is a real philosophy with its own literature and philosophers, with its own analytical value, with even its own ethical value, and it makes people's lives meaningful. Frankly, from my perspective, it's self-evident that being a nihilist is a lot more positive than, for example, joining Islam as a religion. I used to be a Buddhist. I can say genuinely I see the advantages of nihilism even over Buddhism. But when you look at a religion like Judaism or Islam that actually involves cutting off the foreskin of your penis and maybe losing 50% of the nerve endings you've got in that region of your body for the rest of your life, sexually crippling you to some extent, and let's not even get into clitorectomy, female genital mutilation, which is also a part of the Muslim faith, not so much Christianity or Judaism these days. Yeesh, we live in a world where people will literally cut off their dicks for faith.
But then you have to genuinely believe, because if you don't genuinely believe, then of course you'll have doubts. I've gone through nihilistic periods when in my life, especially through my teens, and it's always when my faith is a bit wavering.
And Lauren Southern can sit there with her caked on makeup and her bleach blonde hair and pretend it's all fun and games to sit there and kind of preach Catholicism for whatever wacky 21st century relativistic reason. And then when you look back at the reality of what Catholicism has been to the indigenous peoples of South America, to the indigenous peoples of Australia, to the indigenous peoples of Canada, what it was even for the peoples of Europe during the Dark Ages, what it meant to the peoples of Eastern Europe when the church was trying to expand its power and destroy the pagans there. There were crusades within Europe, people. There were white-on-white crusades. People want to forget about that. The unspeakable barbarity, violence, and just frankly stupidity that's encompassed in this religion, including, yes, y'all, Galileo, putting a man in prison for daring to iterate the theory that the Earth revolves around the sun instead of vice versa, the Earth being the center of the solar system with the sun revolving around it. It was a punishable offense. To take all of that and to pose it now in the year 2018, to say that religion, and specifically the Catholic religion, is a cure for nihilism, and at the same time to characterize nihilism as if it's an illness in want of a cure, to me, well, this is the sort of thing that at least merits a very casual YouTube video made in reply.
At the end of the day, I don't give up hope because I do believe in God. So it's pretty much what happens on Earth in the end doesn't really matter.
This is where the tone of the video suddenly gets much more somber and serious. Implicitly, what these women are presenting to you in this video invites you to imagine that if you have a meaningless life, if you have an unhappy life, the cure for this is belief. The cause of your existential anguish, unhappiness, or sense of aimlessness is a lack of belief. And it's actually very important that we challenge that assumption. And I don't even mean on some kind of social, abstract, political level. I mean for you as an individual psychologically. If you're unhappy with your life, if your life is meaningless to you, why would you or anyone assume that the solution is belief? Now, some people might assume the solution is to join a sports team. That's not completely insane. Joining the Catholic Church, with its history of genocide, slavery, genital mutilation, you name it, when you think about it, putting your faith in any ideology, but especially a disproven mass murder-based ideology, an ideology with a history of mass murder, like Catholicism or like communism. This isn't just wildly irrational. It's actually a solution that doesn't relate in any meaningful way to the problem. On a personal level, keeping it real, I really lack the words to express to you how much better my life became, how much profoundly better my life became when I became a nihilist. Because nihilism isn't just a critique of belief. But when you really do start living as a nihilist and seeing the world through this philosophy, you stop wanting to believe in things. And so you lose all of the anxiety and agony that arises out of wanting to believe in things that just can't be true, and then being disillusioned when, of course, they turn out to be not what you want to be, or looking for meaning in things, seeking meaning in things outside of yourself in this world. Again, not necessarily religion. The fundamental error that all of these belief systems engage in is precisely looking in the world outside you for a relationship of authority, instead of regarding those worldly authorities as merely authors, as merely people who struggled in their own way to create something meaningful, starting from a blank sheet of paper, as you too, you yourself in your own way, must start from a blank sheet of paper and create something meaningful in your life.
So the first solution is philosophy and self-knowledge. Of course, Brittany and I are not experts on these issues.
You know, the questions we have to deal with are, how is it possible that we live in a world where so many people are willing to kill others and even kill themselves for the sake of a belief? How is it that belief has such a tremendous power to tyrannize whole societies and to tyrannize an isolated individual, even when there is no priest watching you, when there's no authority figure looking over you? What is this relationship between a human being and an imaginary object, whether or not it happens to be God, whether or not it happens to be a more complex system of beliefs like communism that can't be boiled down to belief in just one thing? Atheism ultimately can only take you so far. Atheism only concerns the problem of God. And the solution to that they pose is that there is no God, or there are no gods. It's very fundamentally different to approach the same problems, be they big or small, from the standpoint of nihilism. You know, there's this saying from Latin, e quovis ligno. From any block of wood, an idol may be carved. You know, you can have this religious mentality. It doesn't necessarily fasten onto a god. It doesn't necessarily fasten onto a statue of Jupiter or Zeus or Jesus or some other, religious tradition. But the point is to say, there is nothing to be believed in. I can remember what it was like to live when I was really looking for meaning in the outside world. And in my case, it wasn't primarily religion. It was philosophy, and even political philosophy, and even, say, disciplines like economics. But I was looking for the meaning of life in the world outside me, looking for things to believe in, looking for things to have faith in. And the fundamental shift that took place when I instead, started to simply regard these authorities as mere authors, as what they were doing, not as setting down truths for me to relate to, but as mere authorship. When I instead could look in a detached and sympathetic way at a book, whether the author was someone who died over 1,000 years ago, a great and famous name, or someone from our own century or what have you, when I could sympathize with their struggle, filling up a blank page, and when I saw my own life also as a blank page that I stood in a creative relationship towards, instead of thinking of the world outside me as, let's say, so much earth burying the truth that these philosophers were digging up, that they were, discovering and presenting something objectively real that I was beholden to, that we had to serve the truth, and so on. Of instead seeing these other philosophers, these other authors, these other political leaders, these other authorities as mere authors, as people who themselves were struggling with a creative task. Not a task of discovery, not of discovering something that's already there, but a task of sitting down with a blank piece of paper, of trying to create something meaningful that matters to themselves and that matters to other people. And again, of course, this is the ultimate irony. When you're a nihilist, it's not that you regard the Bible as something good or evil. It's not that you regard the holy texts of Buddhism as something good or evil. You simply do not regard them as something to be believed in the same sense that we can look at literature, etc., etc. All these things are just the products of human creativity. Because when we've overcome belief itself, when we've overcome not just faith, but the desire to have faith, wanting to have faith, then all of these texts equally are really just works of art. They're really just so much literature for our delectation. They cease to have this power to tyrannize us. They cease to have the power to create whole societies and drive other societies to extinction. They certainly lose the power to drive us to mutilate our own genitals. As I say, even Judaism and Islam, to a large extent Christianity, millions and millions of Christians are still engaged in circumcision, as so many of those religions still do to this day. So, first things last, when I encounter people with this misconception, when I encounter people who think that nihilism is just an act of teenage rebellion against the high school principal, when I meet people who have this kind of supercilious and dismissive attitude, or presume to talk about curing nihilism as if it's a disease, what do I tell them? Atheists present a critique of God. They disprove the existence of God, however you'd like to put that, okay? Nihilism also rejects the Christian God. However, what nihilism does is that it is a critique of belief itself. So the problem that atheism is posed to solve or counter is God, and thus belief in God. But what nihilism addresses is belief as such. And belief is at the root of such an unbelievable range of aberrant human behavior. Why would it be so hard for people to see that belief is something that needs a cure, when belief leads to, people literally cutting off their own foreskins, when it leads to the unbelievable excesses and atrocities of the whole history of human religion, and when, frankly, it just leads to the enforced mediocrity of the Dark Ages in Europe. We don't have to look so far beyond our own history. We don't have to look beyond the 17th century in the history of England. England, 1630 to 1650. That short period of history, trust me, start on Wikipedia tonight. Belief itself, I wouldn't go so far to say that it's an illness, but certainly when I see someone like this offering to cure nihilism, I really have to ask instead, why is it that so few people are talking about a cure for belief?
À-bas-le-ciel.